I think a lot of these apps are taking a hard look at their tokenomics now that we're in a bear market and trying to figure out how they can redirect some of these cash flows to the token. That's ultimately what led to this Atom 2.0 thing, was people just complaining all day about the tokenomics, and finally it bubbled up to the top issue in the community and they're doing something about it.
Welcome back, everybody. A lot of things been happening in the Cosmos ecosystem, and we're going to dive into those right now. We have Justin back here, and he's going to head us on what's happening.
Yeah, there's been a lot of excitement in the Cosmos community recently about an upcoming announcement for revamping the tokenomics of the Atom token of the Cosmos hub chain. I think September 28th is the date when they announce it, but you can go into some of the community forums and get an idea of what's going on. But essentially, it comes down to adding a form of cash flow into the Atom token, which was not there previously. Anyone that's been familiar with the Atom token should know that prior to this, there was really no economic value to Atom. It just gives you the right to stake. And of course, you can get an APY on that through inflation. So there's just inflation of the Atom tokens. But you can't just inflate a token forever, right? It's eventually there has to be a fundamental demand buying this token to actually give it value. And that's the whole point of this revamping the tokenomics, to give it actual demand. And it's looking like it's going to come from charging fees on the inter-blockchain messages. And that's really the whole point of Cosmos, is to have the IBC, the inter-blockchain communication, that for the most part goes through this hub chain. And so all these other app chains are kind of connected to the hub chain where Atom staking occurs. And those blockchains have to send messages or bridge tokens to each other, and they're all going to be paying fees to the hub chain. So something along those lines is what we should expect to see in this announcement. And I personally think that's very bullish for Atom, because Cosmos is positioning itself to really be a hub for a lot of crypto activity. We're now seeing chains outside of Cosmos wanting to implement IBC and be able to participate in that. And there are also people extolling the benefits of running your own app chain and connecting it to Cosmos, as opposed to running a dApp on Ethereum. So I think that there's a lot to be excited about in the Cosmos community, and maybe it's a bear market outperformer.
I've felt over the last 2 years, a lot has been being built within that ecosystem, right? But I feel like the general public is not very familiar with what it is or what it does, or kind of actually what's happening there, right? So maybe start with, why is someone approaching the Cosmos ecosystem versus Ethereum?
Yeah. So it all comes down to the architecture of your blockchain or multiple blockchains. When you deploy an app on Cosmos, for the most part, you are creating your own blockchain, and you're going to have your own validators and your own token, and you pretty much own that chain. Whatever you want to do with it, if you want to fork it, roll it back, have different validator rules, have a different virtual machine so you can use different programming languages, etc., you can control all of that, and then you connect your chain to the Cosmos hub. And that allows you access to all these other chains, all those other tokens, and all those other apps. You can really bridge yourself into a thriving crypto ecosystem, but maintain sovereignty, maintain control over your own chain. That's really the benefit of Cosmos. Now, you do lose some things when you do this compared to, say, Ethereum or Solana. Namely, you lose composability and shared security. So in Ethereum, in Solana as well, when you deploy a dApp to the main chain, that dApp can directly interact with other dApps. So you can have a flash loan where you borrow some from Aave and then you do some trades on Uniswap or whatever, and that all happens on one chain. In Cosmos, you can't do that, because there's no way to actually borrow money from another chain, get it over to your DEX in time, and then do the swap and then pay it back all in one transaction. You can't do that. So there's less composability in Cosmos. Although they are working on that, there is something called inter-blockchain accounts that's going to address some of that. But the point is, with Cosmos, your applications are a little bit more isolated, and it's a little bit harder to integrate with other apps from a development perspective. So if you're an application that really needs a lot of connectivity and you're building on top of a lot of other apps, Cosmos is probably not the chain for you, at least at this point in time. But if your application is more or less isolated, or it only depends on a few things, Cosmos is looking better and better every day. And I will point to a recent hack to actually demonstrate this point. So there's a DEX on Cosmos called Osmosis, and they have their own chain, of course, and other chains can bridge their tokens over to Osmosis and then deposit those in liquidity pools, act like a Uniswap sort of thing. And so that allows all these different chains to use Osmosis and get the benefit of that liquidity. So Osmosis was hacked back in June. Somebody figured out a way to basically withdraw more money than they put in, and they withdrew like $5 million out of some liquidity pools. Well, fortunately, the developers were on top of this. They must have had somebody watching the chain, and they saw this happen, and they halted the blockchain within a few blocks of this hack going down. So they were very quick to respond, but they did halt the chain, and that prevented the hacker from withdrawing the tokens or bridging them off of that chain onto another. Once they've done that, it's much more difficult to roll back the chain because you don't control that anymore. If they were to bridge those tokens back to another chain, now you'd have to negotiate with that community and say, hey, can you guys also, fork this hack out from the state? But because they were able to halt the funds from leaving, they were able to actually send out a software update to the validators that basically just said, we're going to undo this hack. It's like it never happened. So they just forked it out. Much in the same way of like the 2016, the DAO fork, when Ethereum forked that hack out of history. Of course, it's always controversial doing these forks, but when you have your own app chain and all the users and all the validators are just concerned about this one app and its success, you can come to a social consensus much more easily around these forks. And you can say, yeah, this is a no-brainer. This $5 million, obviously we want to protect our users. So we're going to go ahead and fork this out. Now, of course, with great power comes great responsibility, and you could have issues where, you do have controversial forks, and it kind of begs the question of who's really in charge of that. But having this capability, I think, is crucial when hacks are so devastating in DeFi, and being able to respond to them quickly and actually prevent the funds from escaping your ecosystem. I think that's a huge benefit to a lot of chains, and it's going to give a lot more confidence to DeFi in terms of addressing hacks and not losing customer funds.
So with these new proposed tokenomics, do you think we're going to see this across most projects in the next few years where there's a revenue share with those token holders to kind of create that value accrual?
Yeah, I think revenue sharing or having some sort of cash flow or indirect burn-like dividend is the way to go for most tokens, especially in the bear market where you can't just rely on up-only Ponzi-nomics, to pump the token price or to get some crazy APY on a yield farm. You actually have to have real value derived under this token, and you have to have a reason for people to buy it and to have a way to value the token, at least theoretically, so you can have investors doing the analysis and deciding whether this is undervalued or overvalued based on the projected cash flows, just like a stock would. I mean, there's nothing fundamentally different in crypto economics than there is in traditional economics with respect to cash flows and valuing an asset. It ultimately comes down to the rights to these cash flows or the rights to these fees that someone is paying. And I think a lot of these apps are taking a hard look at their tokenomics now that we're in a bear market and trying to figure out how they can redirect some of these cash flows to the token. That's ultimately what led to this Atom 2.0 thing, was people just complaining all day about the tokenomics, and finally it bubbled up to a top issue in the community, and they're doing something about it. We're going to see more projects doing this. We're sort of in the mode of create token first, figure it out later, yeah. Right? And now they're in the figuring out phase of how do you actually push economic value to this token. So this is something to watch out for in the bear market and see who is actually innovating and who is actually coming up with good economic designs for their token.
So now let's say we move to where there's value or revenue share or whatever that may be. Now is the next stage going to be that fees on the network are too expensive and we need to bring those down? And then we're squeezing back the other side. Like, it seems like a little bit of a battle, right? Because if you're sharing fees with token holders, then that means you could reduce maybe fees on the transactions.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just one of these trade-off spaces we're going to have to explore, which is what is the right value for fees and how much is someone expecting to pay in a given transaction, depending on what they're doing, of course. And then how much revenue can you drive to the network? You often see people complain about Solana and say, oh, well, the fees are like fractions of a penny. So you're never going to pay off all the validators, especially when they have to pay for all these expensive servers. And then on the other hand, you have proponents saying, well, we're going to make up for that by just having so many transactions per second. It'll end up being a decent amount of fees. So we're kind of seeing the extremes here, which like on the ETH layer 1, you're going for the high fees, very important transactions that are going to pay for that. And then on the Solana side, you're going for massive amounts of cheap transactions and hoping that pays off for the validators. So we're going to have to see, where does that equal out, and what are people willing to pay for these dApps?
So obviously everyone's a betting person, right? I mean, so that takes us to the derivatives market, dYdX. They've been moving over to Cosmos, and what is that reason? Why are they doing that, and what are the benefits?
So there's their stated reasons, and then there's some speculative reasons, which I'll get into. Their stated reasons is that it allows them to have an on-chain order book and order matching. Right now, the dYdX developers have to run some servers to actually do that. So the layer 2 that they're currently on is just executing the trades, right? When they've matched up a buyer and a seller, they post that trade to the network, and that's what's actually happening on the chain. But the actual order book, when you're putting these limit buys and sells, and then the matching of those, that's happening on dYdX's own servers. And so there's been a lot of regulatory flack, so to say, that they've been taking for this, that they're sort of running an exchange and they have to register with the SEC or something because they're running this order matching engine. So running their own Cosmos chain allows them to customize the rules of that chain and basically make all the validators do that job for them of running the order matching and hosting the order book. So that's their stated reason for moving. Now, the speculative reason comes down to regulation, because we've seen a lot of this or that is a security from the SEC, from Gary Gensler, and dYdX is supposed to have, the token is supposed to have cash flow from the trades, right? There's supposed to be an actual incentive there to buy the token and for it to have an economic value like we were discussing. But the problem is, if you have cash flow and if you have voting rights, well, hey, isn't that a security, right? But if your token is an L1 token, is it a commodity? It sure looks a lot more like it, because now you have to buy this just to pay transaction fees. And furthermore, it's fully decentralized. There's no developers running some order book servers anymore. It's just anyone who wants to run a validator can now start contributing to this. Maybe it will just end up being the traders themselves running it, or whoever wants to get the staking rewards. But it's basically out of the developers' hands at that point, and the SEC can come down hard on the dYdX company and totally put them out of business. But the chain will still run, and you can still use the DEX. So I think that regulatory pressure is the main reason why they want to become their own L1, so to say. And Cosmos makes a lot of sense because they can connect into the Cosmos hub, and people can bridge tokens from the broader Cosmos ecosystem over to their chain very easily, and of course start trading their derivatives there. So I think that we're going to see more apps kind of go this route where they're concerned about regulatory issues. They don't have a lot of composability requirements, so they can go ahead and just run their own chain, and it's all kosher, hopefully, with the regulators.
This kind of comes down to how many chains are going to be going on around the world, huh?
Yeah, certainly. We're going to see who goes this route and what. Maybe it just becomes there's so many of them that it's a whack-a-mole game for the regulators, and that's sort of your defense. There's just too many to go after.
So what else do we have going on in Cosmos that in regards to other networks that are coming to participate?
Yeah, so we're seeing a couple external networks now wanting to bridge over to Cosmos. And I use this word bridge very lightly. I mean, it means a bunch of different things, right? You have your traditional like multi-sig bridge where you're putting some tokens into a contract. It's got some kind of multi-sig, you need like 4 out of 9 people to sign off on it, and then they'll issue the tokens to their chain and vice versa, right? When I say bridge, I'm talking about actually using the Cosmos IBC, or inter-blockchain communication protocol. And that's where your network implements some specification so that those nodes on your network can directly post messages to the Cosmos hub chain or any Cosmos chain. And that allows you to directly bridge without trusting a multi-sig or any sort of weird zero knowledge setup to actually get tokens and get messages across to these other chains. What this enables these other chains to do is have access to the liquidity in the Cosmos ecosystem. So recently we've seen a post on the ETH research community that proposes a way to connect the ETH L1 to Cosmos with an IBC specification. And they're going to do this through zero knowledge proofs, because the way IBC works is you actually have to run a light client on your own blockchain, which can be very expensive depending on the chain. In the case of Ether, your Ethereum smart contract has to validate the signatures of all the validators of that other chain. That's hundreds of signatures, and it ends up being too much to run on the Ethereum main chain. So what someone proposed is that they can actually wrap that in a zero knowledge proof and then just post that small proof to the chain. And that will allow the Ethereum main chain to directly bridge over to the Cosmos hub and have access to all of that. I think that would be great, because then you'd have the broader Ethereum community ecosystem with all the layer twos being able to natively get access to the Cosmos ecosystem. It would be a really cool connection to have. And I think something like that is inevitable just with all the fragmented liquidity currently. We've also seen recently a new announcement from Sei Labs, SEI, not to be confused with Sui, SUI, which is a whole nother blockchain, but Sei Labs, and I might not be pronouncing that right, so I apologize. They recently proposed a fork of Solana that will implement the IBC protocol so that it can directly talk to Cosmos. And because it uses Solana's virtual machine, it will also be able to bridge directly with the Solana mainnet. So they're kind of pitching themselves as this bridge chain between Solana and Cosmos. And again, I think that would be great, because you'd have access to the high speed, high composability DeFi on Solana, but you'd be able to get your tokens over to Cosmos and vice versa. It's a win-win for both ecosystems. So we're kind of seeing this trend of people connecting into Cosmos and wanting to be connected there.
We can see from the benefits of connecting, but how about on the other side? Like, what is the disadvantage? Meaning, like, I would think it's easier for you to lose liquidity from one aspect if someone goes somewhere else.
Yeah, you could argue that, you're sort of opening up the competition, right? And you're gonna have fair weather friends, fair weather liquidity. I don't really buy that argument, though. I do think it's a net win, because the reason why people want to come to your chain are for its technical advantages. People don't want to be locked in. If your chain has the fastest composability, in the case of Solana, then that's what you lean on. And you want liquidity from other ecosystems to be able to come in and leave as they please. And you're innovating on the properties of that blockchain, not necessarily its connectivity. If anything, I could see Solana stealing liquidity from Cosmos rather than the other way around. Because where do you want your liquidity to be? Where do you want these DEX trades to happen? You want it to happen where you can have high frequency trading and flash loans and composable DeFi, all that sort of good stuff. So I think it's a win for Solana to bridge to Cosmos. And I think it's a win for Cosmos because they need that infrastructure for their projects. So this trend is not going to stop anytime soon, in my opinion.
So all in all, you're bullish on the Cosmos token now for the next few years if this proposal passes?
Yeah, I mean, I need to actually see what the tokenomics are going to be when they announce it. But a lot of people that I follow, that I respect their opinions, they have, inside knowledge of what's going on and seem to be excited about it. So I'm cautiously optimistic about it, but I'm going to wait and see what actual design they've come up with. Assuming they can make it work, assuming they can extract some value out of the transactions going through the Cosmos hub, it's very bullish, because the Cosmos hub is really positioning it itself to be kind of a center of the multi-chain world. You can imagine like in the internet itself, right? You're like a hub of the internet. You're a Google or you're a Twitter or something like that. You've got everyone connected to you, and you're sort of facilitating communication between all these people. So Cosmos Hub, from a usage perspective, very bullish. Token, we'll see what they come up with, but I'm cautiously optimistic.
All right, that's great. Everyone, obviously like and subscribe. And where should they follow you on Twitter?
Follow me at JGrizzled1, JGrizzled1. I post some hot and spicy takes. Hopefully, we'll see some takes about the Cosmos ecosystem soon.
The Joe Roberts Show.